My unfaithful wife was cooking dinner and asked what I wanted to eat. But I already knew she was sleeping with another man, so I told her to make whatever she's making for him too. Hey Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. For the longest time, I thought I was living what most people would call the dream life. I work as a marketing consultant in Miami, making good money and enjoying the lifestyle that comes with it. I've got the house, the car, basically the whole package that society tells you to want. I've been married to Victoria for several years now, and honestly, I thought everything was perfect between us. Looking back, I realized just how wrong I was about that. It was a typical evening when everything came crashing down. I had just gotten home from work, and Victoria was walking in at almost the same time as me. I could hear her car keys jingling as she juggled them with her purse, which was sliding off her shoulder in that practiced way she always managed. Her hair was perfectly curled, and her makeup looked fresh like she had just applied it. She was wearing this tight top that definitely screamed, "Look at me," to anyone who might be watching. But here's the thing. She wasn't looking at me anymore, if you know what I mean. Without any preamble or small talk, she asked me a simple question. What's for dinner? It should have been innocent enough. Just a normal question between spouses at the end of a long day. But something about the way she said it, combined with everything I had been noticing lately, made me respond without really thinking it through. Whatever you and he are having, I said. The moment those words left my mouth, the house went completely silent. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence you get when everything is comfortable and right with the world. This was the ugly kind of silence, the kind that means something important has just died between two people. Her heels, which had been clicking rhythmically against the kitchen tile, stopped moving entirely. I didn't look up at first. Instead, I kept myself busy slicing an onion on the cutting board, acting like this mundane task actually mattered. Like anything in our life still had the meaning I thought it did. You know those moments when time seems to split in two, when you can feel your life dividing into before and after. This was definitely one of those moments, and I knew there was no going back from whatever was about to happen next. Her voice didn't answer back to my accusation. There was no immediate excuse, no deflection, no angry denial like I might have expected. Just this pure, heavy stillness hanging in the air between us like a thick fog. Finally, I turned around slowly to face her, and what I saw confirmed everything I had been dreading for weeks. She was still standing there holding those car keys in her hand, her purse straps slipping down her arm in slow motion. Her lipstick was still perfect, her hair still done up nice and styled. She looked absolutely beautiful, put together like she had made an effort to look good for someone. The problem was that someone clearly wasn't me anymore, and we both knew it. What struck me most was that her face wasn't showing the guilt I expected to see. Instead, I could see this look of calculation crossing her features, like her brain was scrambling behind those eyes, trying to figure out the best way to handle this situation. Then came what I can only describe as a performance. "What are you talking about?" she asked, as if I hadn't just spoken perfect English, as if my words needed some kind of translation. I took the cutting board I had been using and dumped all the vegetables directly into the sink without any ceremony. I wiped my hands deliberately on the dish towel, then walked past her into the hallway. I reached into that one drawer I had been avoiding for days, the one that contained something that had been eating away at me for nearly a week. I pulled out a glossy 5x7 photograph and carried it back to the kitchen. In the picture, she was smiling with her legs crossed like a professional model, sitting across from him at some upscale restaurant. The table was set with flickering candlelight, and their wine glasses were catching the warm light beautifully. She looked completely carefree, without a worry in the world, and more importantly, she looked happier than she had with me in months. I slid the photograph onto the counter between us without saying a single word. She didn't even bother to look down at it, which told me everything I needed to know. Instead, she immediately went on the offensive. "Are you stalking me now?" she asked, and there it was. No denial, no shock, no outrage at being falsely accused, just deflection and an attempt to make me the villain in this story. That response was pure Victoria right there. Whenever she got caught in something she couldn't easily explain away, she would always go on the attack. She would turn the tables and try to make you feel like the bad guy for even questioning her. I had seen her do this exact thing to coworkers before, to friends, even to waitresses when her order came out wrong. I just never thought I would end up being the target of that particular strategy. "I wasn't stalking you," I said quietly, keeping my voice as calm and controlled as possible. "I was picking up my dry cleaning downtown, and you were 2 blocks away. You were sitting there laughing like some teenager on prom night, completely lost in the moment with him. She still refused to look down at the photograph sitting on the counter between us. She kept clutching those car keys like they were some kind of weapon she might need to defend herself with. "What do you want me to say, Tyler?" she asked, her voice taking on an almost bored tone. "That I had dinner with a friend? That I'm completely tired of walking into this museum every day?" Museum of boredom. That's what she called our home. Our life together. This wasn't just a confession about the affair. It was pure contempt pouring out of her. She was speaking to me like I had somehow wronged her by getting older, like I had aged out of her interest level, and it was my fault for not staying eternally fascinating. I sat down at the kitchen table and just stared at her without any yelling or dramatic theatrics. For the first time in years, I really studied her face, trying to see past all the makeup and styling to the person underneath. What I realized in that moment was that I was looking at a complete stranger, someone I didn't actually know at all despite years of marriage. "You done?" I asked her directly. Her lip curled up in obvious disgust. "Excuse me? I mean it. Are you done lying to me? Done pretending this is something else entirely?" She stepped closer to me, her voice getting sharper. "I don't see what this is. You don't know anything about what's really going on." I let out a short, completely humorless laugh that surprised even me. "I know you moaned Connor's name 3 nights ago while you were sleeping." She froze completely at those words, like someone had just poured ice water over her entire body. I stood up from the table and reached into my back pocket, pulling out something else I'd been carrying around for days. It was a hotel keycard that she had dropped in the laundry basket, probably without even realizing it. Room 428 at the Embassy Suites, from the exact night she claimed she had stayed late with Jessica for some work emergency. "Want to try explaining this again?" I asked, holding the keycard where she could see it clearly. She looked at that plastic card like it might actually bite her. The silence filled the room again, thick and suffocating. Then she did the most Victoria thing possible. She scoffed dismissively, turned on her heel like I was boring her, and walked upstairs like I was some child having a tantrum that she didn't have time to deal with. I heard the bedroom door slam shut above me, and I just sat there staring at that hotel keycard in my hand. I didn't follow her this time, didn't try to continue the argument or demand more answers. I was done playing those games, done chasing after someone who clearly didn't want to be caught. I didn't sleep that night at all. I didn't even try to close my eyes or pretend that rest was possible. Instead, I lay on the living room couch with all the lights turned off, just listening to everything happening around me. I could hear her footsteps moving around upstairs, the muffled sound of drawers opening and closing repeatedly. But there was no apology coming down those stairs, no explanation, not even a simple knock on the railing. There was no, "Hey, I messed up badly, let's talk about this." Absolutely nothing but deliberate distance. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, not blinking, barely even breathing properly. My mind wasn't racing around in circles like you might expect. Instead, it was completely flatlining, just empty and still. That's the part nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always make you explode with rage or break down in tears. Sometimes it paralyzes you completely, makes the air feel thicker somehow, and slows everything down to an unbearable crawl. Sometime after 2:30 in the morning, I heard the floorboard near the staircase creak under someone's weight. Then there was complete silence again, like whoever had made the sound was frozen in place. I didn't move a single muscle or give any indication that I was awake. Maybe she was watching to see if I was actually asleep. Maybe she had considered coming downstairs to say something real and honest for once. Or maybe she didn't care about me at all and was just heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. I stayed perfectly still anyway, keeping my eyes shut and my jaw clenched tight. When I finally opened my eyes again, it was morning. The sky outside my window was the color of dirty dishwater, gray and uninviting. I sat up slowly, my back aching like hell from spending the night on a couch that wasn't designed for sleeping. The house was completely still and empty in a way that felt different from the night before. She was gone, without a trace. No note left behind, no text message, nothing. I walked upstairs like some kind of zombie, moving slowly and deliberately. The bed hadn't been touched at all during the night. She hadn't slept there, hadn't even tried to rest. Instead, she had packed her things in the darkness, quietly and coldly, like a professional thief stealing herself away from our life together. Her bathroom drawer was standing wide open, and I could see that her hair straightener was gone, along with all her expensive perfume bottles. There was a lipstick smudge on the mirror from where she had probably checked her appearance one last time before disappearing into the night. I should have been furious about all of this, should have been screaming or throwing things around the room. But I wasn't angry, not even close. I was something much worse than angry. I was completely numb inside, like someone had injected Novocaine directly into my heart. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail without even ringing. I sent her a text asking, "Where did you go?" But no answer came back, not even one of those automatic read receipts. Then I did something I never thought I would do in a million years. I opened her laptop that was still sitting on the kitchen counter. It was still logged into everything, all her accounts and messages spread out like an open book. What I found there wasn't just evidence of a mistake or a moment of weakness. Her affair wasn't some spontaneous thing that had just happened. It was carefully scheduled like a business meeting, with Friday lunches and hotel meetups planned out weeks in advance. Dinner reservations were synced perfectly with her work meetings, creating alibis for every encounter. There was even a photo of him saved in her files. Connor and I realized I had seen that face before somewhere. He had been at her office Christmas party 2 years ago. I remembered him specifically because I had caught him staring at her a little too long while she was giving a toast to the team. At the time, I had thought to myself, "Nah, no way. I'm just being paranoid." That had been my first big mistake, giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who clearly didn't deserve it. I clicked on one thread of their text messages, and what I saw there made something twist painfully in my chest. He had sent her a selfie of himself in bed, shirtless and grinning like he owned the entire world. She had replied with a heart emoji, then typed, "I wish I could fall asleep next to you every night instead of that zombie." Zombie. That's what she had been calling me behind my back in her private conversations with him. I felt something rupture deep in my chest, but I didn't cry or break down completely. I just stared at the phone screen, at the date and timestamp of that message. It was from last Wednesday night, the same exact night I had picked up Chinese takeout and watched The Office reruns by myself, while she claimed she had a late HR training call that couldn't be rescheduled. She had probably been with him instead, laughing at my expense and calling me a zombie while I sat alone on our couch. I stood there in her now half-empty bathroom, with the scent of her perfume still hanging in the air like some kind of ghost haunting the space. That's when I realized something important. I hadn't actually lost her recently. She had already been gone for a long time before I caught her. The only thing left now was figuring out what the hell I was going to do next. By noon that same day, the fog that had been clouding my head had hardened into something much heavier and more substantial. It wasn't rage or grief exactly, but this sharp-edged clarity that cut through everything. It was like I was finally seeing the truth, without all the soft filters I had been using for months to make our relationship seem better than it actually was. The lies had always been there waiting for me to notice them. I just hadn't wanted to believe them at all. I decided to take the rest of the week off work and called my boss to tell him there was a family emergency happening. He didn't ask any questions about the details, and I think I sounded brittle enough over the phone that he knew better than to pry. Victoria didn't come back that day, and she didn't return the next day either. But her silence was actually saying more than she ever had in all those late-night talks where she had fed me fake promises about how things were going to get better between us. There were no more "I love you" text messages coming through my phone. No more pretending that everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. Just the digital echo of a woman who couldn't even bother to end things like an adult would. By Friday, I finally got a text message, but it wasn't from her. It was from her sister Jessica instead. "Hey, I heard about what happened," Jessica wrote. "Victoria's staying with me for a while. She just needs some space to think about everything." I stared at that message for a long time, letting the word space sink in. That's what she was calling it now. Space. Not an affair, not betrayal, not abandonment. Just space, like it was some kind of mutual decision we had made together. I texted back, "Tell her to send a lawyer if she needs more space than that." Then I blocked Jessica's number completely. Victoria wanted to turn this whole situation into some vague story about how we grew apart naturally over time. She wanted it to seem mutual somehow, like two people who had simply drifted in different directions instead of what it actually was. One person cheating, lying, and abandoning everything we had built together. There was no way I was going to let her rewrite this story to make herself feel better about what she had done. The next morning, I started collecting evidence systematically. I made printouts of emails and hotel bookings that were under her rewards account. I took screenshots of every message thread I could find. I photographed everything on her laptop and saved it all to a secure drive. If this situation was going to turn legal, I wanted to have a complete file documenting exactly what had happened and when. Even as I built this digital dossier of her betrayal and lies, something inside me still hoped stupidly and weakly that she would call. Not to get back together. That possibility was completely dead and buried. But just to own up to what she had actually done, to admit that she had screwed up badly, to show something that resembled actual remorse for the damage she had caused. She didn't do any of that, of course. Instead, on Saturday night around 8 p.m., there was a knock at my front door. It wasn't her, and it wasn't Jessica either. It was Connor himself standing on my front step. Yeah, he actually had the audacity to show up at my house, on my property, like he had some kind of right to be there. I opened the door and just stared at him without saying a word. He looked exactly like he had in that selfie photo, cocky face, smug eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. He was wearing some overpriced watch that caught the porch light, clearly trying to project an image of success and confidence. "Hey man," he started, his voice carrying a tone that was supposed to sound casual and friendly. "Can we talk for a minute?" I didn't answer him at all. I didn't move from the doorway, didn't blink, didn't give him any indication that I was going to make this easy for him. I just leaned against the doorframe and waited for him to continue with whatever speech he had prepared. He cleared his throat nervously when the silence stretched on too long. "Look, I didn't know how serious things were between you two. I mean, Victoria told me that you guys were basically separated emotionally for a while now. She made it sound like the marriage was already over." I actually laughed out loud at this, a short and completely humorless sound that seemed to surprise both of us. "Get off my porch," I told him firmly. "I just wanted to say that I didn't mean for this to happen the way it did," he continued, clearly not taking the hint that this conversation was over. I stepped forward, not in a threatening way, but with the kind of firmness that makes your position absolutely clear. You're not going to come here and turn this into some romantic comedy where everyone learns a lesson and walks away feeling good about themselves. You two didn't accidentally fall in love like some fairy tale. She lied to both of us and you helped her do it. That's all this really is. And that's all it's ever going to be. He looked like he wanted to argue back, like he had more justifications prepared, but something in my tone must have gotten through to him. He didn't say anything else for a long moment, just nodded slowly, like he was finally understanding the reality of the situation. "All right, man, fair enough," he said quietly. And then he walked back to his car. It was a black Audi, of course, exactly the kind of predictable choice someone like him would make. He drove off into the night without looking back. I shut the door and stood there for a long time, listening to the familiar sounds of my house. The fridge was humming in the kitchen, and the silence felt thick around me again. But this time, it was different somehow. It wasn't the oppressive silence of someone missing or the hollow quiet of abandonment. It was mine completely, my silence, my space, my peace. And for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, that actually felt like something positive. Sunday morning came around, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like a trap I was caught in. Instead, it felt like a crime scene that needed to be properly processed and cleaned. I stood in the bedroom doorway, just staring at the space we used to share. Her side of the closet looked like a torn page from a book, with empty hangers swinging slightly in the air conditioning draft, almost like they actually missed her presence. The perfume bottles that used to line the dresser were gone, but I noticed that one bobby pin remained behind. It was bent slightly and curled like a question mark, a tiny piece of evidence that she had once existed in this space. I grabbed a trash bag from the kitchen and decided it was time to start with the bathroom first. Her toothbrush, hair ties, and expensive skincare bottles were still lined up like little soldiers on the counter. Every trace of her needed to go. I was going to sweep it all clean. This wasn't an act of rage or revenge that I was performing. It was cleansing. It was necessary. I had been sleeping next to a stranger for months, maybe even longer than that, and I needed to reclaim this space as my own. The bed came next in my systematic clearing. I stripped the sheets completely off the mattress and peeled off all the pillowcases too. The scent of her shampoo still clung to the fabric like a persistent ghost that didn't want to leave. I shoved everything into the washer, set it to the hottest setting possible, and let it roar to life with an almost therapeutic intensity. Then I opened the drawer where I had kept the memory box. You know the kind I'm talking about. The keepsake box filled with all the sentimental items from our relationship. I sat on the floor with it balanced in my lap and started pulling out memories one by one. There was the picture of us in Key Largo, both of us sunburned and stupidly in love with each other and the world. There was the postcard she had sent me before we moved in together officially, with her handwriting promising that everything was going to be perfect. I found a crumpled movie ticket stub from a night that had ended with us kissing in a thunderstorm, laughing and getting completely soaked. These weren't just random objects scattered in a box. They were evidence of a life we had built together, a life she had demolished without any warning or consideration for what it might mean to me. Part of me wanted to burn it all to ashes, to watch every memory turn to smoke and disappear. But instead, I packed the box shut carefully and sealed it with tape. I wrote her name on top in clear letters. I didn't want these things in my space anymore, but I wasn't going to destroy them either. Let her deal with the weight of what she had thrown away so easily and carelessly. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from a blocked number. I let it go straight to voicemail without any hesitation. A minute later, the message notification came through, and I could see it was from her. Her voice sounded weak and trembling when I finally played it back. "Hey, I didn't want to text you about this," she said, her words coming out uncertain and shaky. "I know you're probably angry with me, and I understand why. I needed to talk to someone who knows me, and I don't know where to start exactly with all of this. Maybe I'll try calling again later when I figure out what I want to say." That was it. That pathetic attempt at communication. That weak whisper of a phone call was her try at taking some kind of accountability for what had happened between us. There was no real apology, no genuine explanation for her actions, just a maybe hanging in the air like she was doing me some kind of favor by considering whether to call back. I deleted the message without saving it, wanting her words gone as quickly as they had arrived. That night, I did something small but meaningful for my mental state. I went online and bought new sheets, charcoal gray ones that I never would have picked before. We had always done white or beige bedding because, as Victoria always said to me, they're easier to match with everything else in the room. Well, I didn't want to match with anything anymore. I wanted something that was entirely mine, something that had no connection to her preferences or opinions. When I finally laid down in that clean bed with fresh sheets that smelled like nothing but fabric softener, the silence wrapped around me differently than it had before. This wasn't the numbness I had been feeling for days. This was recovery. This was actual healing happening. It was quiet and slow, but it was completely real and mine. Monday morning arrived like a bruise, slow to appear but painful once you finally notice it's there. The house felt hollow inside, but I was beginning to like it that way. It was clean still and uncomplicated for once. I poured myself coffee in a mug that Victoria had bought during our trip to Savannah. It had "Good Vibes Only" written in gold letters across the side. I stared at it for a second, remembering how excited she had been to find it in that little gift shop, how she had insisted it was perfect for our kitchen. Then I dropped it straight into the trash without any hesitation at all. The sound it made cracking at the bottom of the bin was louder than it should have been, final and decisive, like a period at the end of a sentence that had gone on far too long. I checked my phone for any new messages, but there was nothing from Victoria. No new texts, no missed calls, nothing at all. But Jessica had texted me again sometime overnight while I was sleeping. "Victoria's thinking about coming by to get her stuff sometime soon," the message read. "I told her she should call you first to coordinate." I didn't respond to that message at all. I wasn't about to schedule some kind of reunion tour for her betrayal and lies. If she wanted her remaining things back from the house, she could coordinate with a moving company to handle it. I would pack everything up myself, label it all clearly, and I'd even set it on the porch if that's what it took. But she wasn't coming inside this house again. Not unless it was with a lawyer present or a locksmith to change the locks. Around noon, I decided to take action with her keepsake box. The one I had sealed and written her name on in clear letters. I drove it over to Jessica's house and left it right on the front porch without any ceremony. I didn't knock on the door, didn't ring the bell, didn't try to make contact with anyone inside. I just dropped it there and walked back to my car. The sky was gray and completely flat, the kind of weather that actually seemed to fit my mood perfectly. I was pulling out of Jessica's neighborhood when I saw Victoria standing by the front door. She was barefoot, wearing a hoodie that was pulled over her head, and she must have heard my car engine in the driveway. She looked down at the box sitting there on the porch, then looked directly at me sitting in my car. She didn't wave or try to signal me to stop. I didn't slow down the car either, or make any gesture of acknowledgement. The drive back home was completely quiet, except for the sound of my engine and the radio playing softly in the background. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other hand clenched tight in my lap. That was the first time I had actually seen her since the confrontation in our kitchen, and it felt surreal rather than painful. It wasn't even bitter or angry anymore. It was just distant, like she was already part of a life I could barely remember living. Someone from a story that had happened to a different version of myself. That evening, my phone lit up again with her actual number, unblocked this time. I let it ring without answering, then it rang again immediately. On the fourth attempt, I finally picked up the call. There was complete silence on the other end of the line for several seconds. I didn't say anything either, wanting her to make the first move in whatever conversation she thought we needed to have. Finally, she spoke up with a question that completely stunned me. "Are you really doing this?" I blinked, taken aback by her tone. "Doing what exactly?" "Throwing everything away like it meant nothing to you at all." My laugh startled even me when it came out, sharp and completely without any humor. "I didn't throw it away, Victoria. You did that all by yourself. You just expected me to pick through the trash afterward and pretend it was still treasure. You don't understand what really happened between us," she said, her voice taking on that familiar tone she used when she wanted to control the narrative. "No, you don't understand," I cut in before she could continue with whatever revisionist story she had prepared. "You don't get to act like I'm the villain in a story where you're the one who cheated on me." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You were always distant, Tyler. Cold. You didn't see me anymore. You stopped paying attention to what I needed. Because you were too busy warming someone else's bed," I snapped back at her, my patience finally reaching its limit. She went completely quiet again, and I could imagine her standing there with her mouth half open, shocked that I wouldn't let her spin this situation into something where I was somehow responsible for her choices. The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. "I just wanted to talk," she finally muttered weakly, like she was doing me some kind of favor by reaching out. "No," I said firmly, my voice steady and final. "You wanted to be forgiven without actually asking for forgiveness. That's not how this works at all, and that's not how any of this is going to go." Then I ended the call immediately, hanging up before she could respond or try to argue with me further. For the first time since this entire nightmare had started, I felt something close to proud of myself. Proud that I had stood my ground, proud that I hadn't let her manipulate the conversation, and proud that I had finally said exactly what needed to be said. I woke up Tuesday morning to sunlight slicing through the blinds like a scalpel, clean, sharp, and unforgiving but completely honest about what it was revealing. The air in the room was still cold, too cold for July weather in Miami, but I didn't reach for a blanket or try to warm myself up. I just lay there staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, like the world hadn't fundamentally changed overnight. But it had changed. Everything had shifted, and I was finally starting to accept that reality. The quiet surrounding me was no longer just emptiness or the absence of something important. It was mine completely now. I didn't have to listen for her footsteps coming up the stairs anymore. There was no need to wonder when she would come home from work, or if she would pretend to fall asleep before I could ask where she had been all evening. That part of my life was over, and those lonely, suspicious games were finally finished. I spent the morning systematically packing her remaining belongings with careful precision. This wasn't an act of rage or revenge. There was no yelling, no smashing of her things out of spite. It was just calm, methodical sorting through everything she had left behind. Drawer by drawer, I folded each item with the kind of precision you would give to a stranger's belongings, because that's exactly what she was to me now, a stranger who happened to share my last name. Her makeup bag went into the first box, followed by her favorite pair of joggers. Then came the hoodie she had always claimed was actually hers, even though she had stolen it from my closet years ago and never given it back. Into the boxes, everything went, piece by piece. Every so often, I would find something that pulled at the edge of my ribs in an unexpected way. A necklace I had bought her for our 4th anniversary. A pair of socks with little strawberries on them that were ridiculous, but she had loved them so much. There was a half-burned candle that still carried the scent of vanilla and reminded me of nights when things between us had actually been good. I didn't let myself linger on any of these items or get lost in the memories they represented. I packed them all anyway, sealing them into boxes that would carry them out of my life forever. By late afternoon, the guest room was filled with sealed boxes stacked everywhere like a warehouse. Each one was labeled in my neat handwriting with general descriptions of the contents. Then I came across something that stopped me completely in my tracks. The wedding album. It had been tucked behind a row of dusty photo books, almost like I hadn't wanted to see it, but couldn't bring myself to throw it out either. I opened it slowly to the first page and saw her in that white dress, smiling at me like I was the only man on the entire planet who mattered. Page 2 showed our first kiss as husband and wife, captured in perfect detail. Page 3 had us laughing together with champagne glasses raised high and our hands entwined like we actually meant the word forever when we said it. These weren't just random photographs scattered in an album. They were evidence of a life we had built together, a life she had demolished without any warning or consideration for what it would do to me. I didn't cry or scream at the pages like some dramatic scene from a movie. I just stared at them for a long time, really looking at the people we used to be. Then I closed the album gently and set it on top of the last box. She could decide what to do with those pictures and those memories. I didn't need them anymore, didn't want them taking up space in my head or my heart. Around 6 o'clock that evening, she texted me again. Can we meet somewhere? Just talk about everything that's happened? I don't want to end it like this between us. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading her words over and over. Then I typed back carefully, choosing each word with deliberate precision. There's nothing left to talk about. Your things will be ready for pickup by Saturday. I won't be here when you come to get them. Have someone else grab them for you. I hit send immediately without second-guessing myself. 10 minutes later, she replied back with another message. I didn't mean for this to happen the way it did. I didn't answer that text at all, because intentions don't change the impact of what someone does to you. She had meant to lie to me for months. She had meant to hide her affair from me. She had meant to walk out and leave me with a bed full of ghosts and a heart that wouldn't stop asking why this had happened. Now she wanted some kind of closure from me, some final conversation that would make her feel better about her choices. But here's the thing. She had gotten to make all the choices that led us to this point. I had gotten stuck dealing with all the consequences. Let that be enough for her to live with. Saturday came around finally, and the boxes were stacked neatly by the front door like little tombstones marking the death of a life that had never really existed the way I thought it did. I sat on the couch, sipping coffee and waiting. Not for her specifically, but for the sound of someone else's car pulling up the driveway. She didn't come herself, of course. She didn't have the courage to face me or the situation she had created. Instead, a moving service arrived around 11:45 in the morning. It was just some quiet guy in a gray shirt who knocked once, nodded at me politely, and started loading everything into his truck without asking any questions about the circumstances. I signed the clipboard he handed me and gave him the house key that she had never bothered to return after she left that night. And that was it completely. Her final exit from my life happened while I watched Jeopardy reruns on mute in the living room. As the last box disappeared into the back of the truck, I didn't feel relieved exactly, and I wasn't sad either. I just felt clean, like an infection had finally been drained from a wound that could now start healing properly. I thought that would be the absolute end of it all, but at 3:17 in the afternoon, she texted me again. I just got everything back from the house. Thanks for packing it all up so carefully. I'm sorry I couldn't come in person to get it. I didn't want to make things worse between us than they already are. There was no punctuation, no real courage behind the words. I didn't reply to that message. At 3:25, another text came through. Do you really hate me now? That question hit me harder than it should have, and I had to think about my answer. Did I hate her? No. That would have implied that I still had strong feelings left for her, that she still occupied enough space in my heart to generate that kind of intense emotion. What I felt now was something much colder and more distant. It was like picking up an old coat from the back of your closet and realizing it doesn't fit anymore, and wondering why you had kept it around for so long in the first place. I started typing a message back to her. I don't hate you at all. I just don't trust you anymore, and without trust, there's nothing left between us. But then I deleted it before sending it. What was the point of saying any of that to her? She had already made her choices, and I was making mine now. Nothing I could say would change what had happened or make her understand the full scope of what she had destroyed. By sunset, I found myself in the garage pulling down the box of tools that I hadn't touched in years. I needed to fix the cabinet hinge in the kitchen that had been creaking for months. It kept making this annoying sound that reminded me of all those nights I had stayed up late waiting for her to come home, pretending I didn't hear the whispered phone conversations from behind closed bathroom doors, or notice the way her phone would light up with silent text messages at all hours. The hinge took exactly 5 minutes to fix with the right screwdriver. It was funny. I had let that thing stay broken for nearly 2 years, listening to it creak every time someone opened the cabinet door. Now that she was gone, it seemed important to fix the small things that had been bothering me. That night, I cooked a real meal for myself for the first time in months. Not something frozen that I could heat up in the microwave, not leftover takeout from the refrigerator, but actual food that required real cooking. I made garlic chicken with lemon and rosemary, taking my time with each step of the process. I played old records while I prepared the meal, music that I hadn't listened to in years because she had never liked my taste in vintage sounds. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a plate that I had made for no one but myself. For once, the silence surrounding me wasn't lonely or oppressive. It was earned, it was deserved, and it was completely mine. Sunday morning arrived with no text messages waiting on my phone, no unexpected knocks at the front door, and no fake apologies bleeding through my voicemail. It had been exactly 1 week since she had walked out of our house and our marriage, and for the first time, the air finally smelled like nothing at all. Not her expensive perfume lingering in every room, not her shampoo hanging in the bathroom air, just clean oxygen filling my lungs. I opened all the windows wide and played music loud throughout the entire house. I chose that song she used to hate, the one she always called obnoxious and repetitive whenever it came on the radio. I played it 3 times in a row just to see if I still cared about her opinion of my musical choices. I discovered that I didn't care at all, and that realization felt good. It felt like freedom. Around noon, I opened the bedroom closet and stood there looking at the space we used to share. Half of it was still mine, filled with my clothes and belongings exactly as they had always been. The other half was nothing but empty hangers and a thin layer of dust settling where her things used to hang. That emptiness looked back at me like a dare, like a challenge to do something meaningful with the space. So I decided to fill it, but not with clothes or more of the same things that had been there before. Instead, I filled it with me, with my actual interests and the parts of myself I had somehow forgotten about during our marriage. I brought in books that I hadn't read in years, sketch pads that I had completely forgotten I owned, and my old guitar that hadn't been touched since my college days. I hung a small photograph on the inside of the closet door, a picture of me and my brother at the lake from several years ago. It was a memory that had nothing to do with Victoria, something from my life before her, and hopefully my life after her. This house was no longer haunted by the ghosts of what we used to be together. But then something happened that I didn't expect at all. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard a knock at the front door. It wasn't Connor returning for another awkward conversation, and it wasn't Victoria either. Instead, it was her mother, Patricia, standing on my front step. She was in her 60s with hair like faded silver, and she always wore that rose-scented lotion that made her seem like she belonged in another decade entirely. I opened the door and just stared at her, not sure what to expect from this visit. "Tyler," she said softly, like she wasn't completely sure if I would slam the door in her face. "What are you doing here?" I asked, crossing my arms in a defensive posture without really meaning to. She held up a small paper bag in her hands. "I brought you cookies," she said simply. I blinked at her in complete confusion. "Cookies? Chocolate chip cookies? Your favorite kind?" she explained. "I just thought maybe you could use a kind gesture right now, something to remind you that not everyone in this situation has forgotten about you." It was such a human, completely absurd thing to do that I found myself stepping aside and letting her into my house without even thinking about it. She looked around quietly and her eyes scanned the room carefully. I knew she could see all the changes everywhere. The missing photographs, the unpacked books, the way the air didn't carry Victoria's presence anymore. "She told me what happened," Patricia said finally, setting the bag of cookies on my kitchen counter. Not all the details, of course, just enough for me to understand the basic situation. I didn't say anything back to her, just waited to see where this conversation was going to lead. "I'm not here to defend her actions," she added quickly, like she wanted to make that point absolutely clear. "God knows I raised her better than that, and I'm disappointed in the choices she's made. But I am here to tell you something important that I think you need to hear. I saw the way you loved her, Tyler. I saw how much you tried every single day to make her happy." That comment hit something deep inside me, something soft that I had been protecting for days. Patricia gently touched my arm and continued speaking. "She's going to regret this decision, Tyler. Maybe not today, maybe not even this year, but one day she will understand what she threw away." I nodded once, slowly, letting her words sink in. "She already does regret it," I told her quietly. "She just doesn't know how to say it or how to deal with what she's done." Patricia gave me a sad but understanding smile. "If you ever want to talk about anything, not about her, just about life in general, I want you to know that I'm still here for you. You don't have to lose everyone just because you're losing her. I walked her to the front door and watched as she disappeared down the sidewalk, her silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight. Then I went back inside and ate the cookies she had brought me. They were perfect, warm, a little messy, and made with the kind of care that reminded me what genuine kindness actually felt like. For the first time since this entire situation had blown up in my face, I thought maybe I was actually going to be okay. The following week moved like thick molasses. Slow, but full of actual substance instead of the empty rushing around I had been doing before. I started going on walks every morning before work, just around the neighborhood with a cup of coffee in my hand and headphones in my ears. I wasn't trying to escape from anything or run away from my problems. Instead, I was trying to reclaim space that belonged to me, to see my surroundings with fresh eyes. The neighborhood looked completely different now, even though it was the same houses and the same trees I'd been passing for years. But now I noticed details I had completely missed before. There was a porch swing 2 houses down the street that looked perfectly comfortable. There was a lady with a yellow lab who always smiled and waved when she saw me walking by. There was a kid who drew elaborate galaxies on the sidewalk with colored chalk, creating temporary art that would wash away with the next rain. I had missed all of these small, beautiful details because I had been too wrapped up in Victoria's orbit to see anything else around me. I had been so focused on trying to keep her happy and interested that I had stopped paying attention to the world that existed outside of our relationship. By Thursday, my lawyer called with an update on the divorce proceedings. Her voice was calm, efficient, and completely clinical as she laid out our options. An uncontested divorce will be the fastest route, she said in her professional tone. Given everything you've told me about the circumstances, we can file the papers, divide the assets cleanly, and that'll be it. The whole thing will be finished and final. Clean. There was that word again, and I found that I liked the sound of it more each time I heard it. Do you want to include any of the evidence you collected? She asked gently, carefully. I paused for a long moment, thinking about all those hotel receipts, text messages, and photographs I had saved. I thought about the audio clip I had recorded of her whispering his name in her sleep, like it was something holy and precious. No, I said finally. I just want her completely gone from my life. I don't need to prove anything to anyone else. After I hung up the phone, I deleted every folder, every screenshot, and every poison memory that I had stored digitally on my laptop. Keeping receipts of her betrayal wasn't going to keep me warm at night or help me move forward with my life. That same night, I got a phone call from a friend I hadn't heard from in months. It was Kevin, an old college buddy who was married now with 2 kids and living in Northern California. He had always been the type to cut straight to the point without dancing around difficult topics. I heard what happened, he said as soon as I answered the phone. Are you all right, man? I appreciated that he didn't try to fake his way through small talk or pretend this was just a casual check-in call. I'm not broken, just tired, I told him honestly. He laughed with understanding. You'll heal, and then you'll thrive. That's the rule, isn't it? You'll see what I mean when you get there. We ended up talking until well past midnight about everything except my divorce. We discussed music, potential hiking plans for when he visited Florida, and dumb old stories from our college days. We laughed about shared experiences with exes, and that time I had almost burned down our dorm trying to make grilled cheese with a clothes iron because the cafeteria was closed. When I finally hung up the phone, I realized something important had happened during our conversation. I had spent 2 full hours without thinking about Victoria even once. That felt like real, tangible progress towards something better. But life doesn't move in straight lines. And just when you think you found some peace and stability, the past has a way of knocking on your door again. Friday morning at 9:45, an email from Victoria appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, "If you'll read this," and I stared at it for 10 full minutes before finally deciding to open it and read every single word. I know you don't owe me anything at all, the email began. I know you probably never want to hear from me again, and I understand why you feel that way. But I've been going to therapy sessions, not because I want you back or because I think we can fix this, but because I finally realized how much I ruined and how badly I hurt you. I lied to myself for so long about what I was doing that I started to believe the lies were actually true. I convinced myself that our marriage was already over, that you had stopped caring about me, that I was justified in looking for happiness somewhere else. But none of that was real. It was all just excuses I made to avoid taking responsibility for my choices. I don't expect forgiveness from you, Tyler, because I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know something important that I should have said a long time ago. You didn't deserve any of this. You were good to me. You were steady and loyal and everything a husband should be. I was the storm that destroyed everything we built together, and I'm sorry for all of it. No excuses, no blame shifting, just pure regret. But her apology didn't matter anymore, not even a little bit. I closed the laptop, got up from my desk, and poured myself a drink. I didn't cry this time, and not a single tear fell down my face. The words she had written were too late, too soft, and too far removed from the version of herself that had once stood in our kitchen asking, "What's for dinner?" while smelling like a man who wasn't me. Sunday arrived with a strange sense of calmness that I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't check my phone for any follow-up replies to her email. I didn't look for additional messages or voicemails. I knew instinctively that she wouldn't write again after sending that lengthy apology. That email had been her curtain call, her final attempt at redemption. It had been too late, too soft, and too far removed from the version of herself that had destroyed our marriage. Instead of dwelling on any of that, I spent the morning repainting the office. The walls used to be that sterile, off-white shade that Victoria had picked because she said it made the room look bigger and brighter. Now I was covering them with a deep burgundy color. Rich, grounded, and not trendy at all. It wasn't the kind of sterile, hospital-like color scheme she had preferred. This felt like something solid and permanent, something that belonged entirely to me. I opened all the windows wide to let the paint dry and watched the breeze ripple through the trees outside. The movement reminded me of something a therapist had said in a podcast I had half listened to once during a long commute. The opposite of betrayal isn't revenge, the voice had explained. It's self-recovery. It's rebuilding your life from the ground up. That phrase hit differently now than it had when I first heard it. It made sense in a way it hadn't before, when I was still trying to save something that was already dead. I took a break around noon and walked to the corner bakery down the street. I bought myself a fresh cinnamon roll, something I used to do regularly when Victoria and I were still together. Back then, I would always bring one back for her too, and she would inevitably take the first bite before I could even open the box properly. Today, I ate it slowly and deliberately at a little metal table outside the bakery, taking my time with each bite. For the first time in months, that cinnamon roll didn't taste like memory or nostalgia. It just tasted like cinnamon and sugar, simple, good, and completely uncomplicated. That night, I had an unexpected encounter at the grocery store of all places. I was standing in the frozen food aisle trying to decide between different pizza options when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Tyler?" I turned around to find Sophia from work standing there with her own shopping basket. We had talked a few times in the break room over the past year, but nothing flirty or serious had ever developed between us. She was just one of those people who embodied casual kindness between coworkers. The type of person who remembers your coffee order and asks how your weekend went, but doesn't pry into your personal life or create workplace drama. She smiled at me warmly. "I didn't know you lived around here." "Just a few blocks over," I told her, gesturing vaguely in the direction of my house. We stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, and then she glanced down at the frozen pizza in my hand. "Solid choice for dinner," she said with a grin. "But if you add sriracha sauce to it, it's actually kind of amazing." I actually laughed out loud at that suggestion, surprised by how natural it felt. "I'll take that under advisement." Then, before I could talk myself out of it or overthink the situation, I asked, "You want to get coffee sometime?" She blinked once, then her smile grew even brighter. "Yeah, I'd like that a lot." It wasn't exactly a date, not really. It was just the beginning of something new and completely undefined, something that didn't carry the weight of history or betrayal. Later that night, as I lay in bed under those charcoal gray sheets I had bought for myself, I realized something significant had happened. I didn't think about Victoria at all before falling asleep. I didn't replay her voice in my head or reread her messages. I didn't let the scent of betrayal hang in the air around me like it had for so many nights before. Instead, I thought about burgundy paint drying on the walls and the way it would look in the morning light. I thought about cinnamon rolls and the unexpected suggestion to put sriracha on pizza. I thought about something softer and quieter that was starting to form in the space where all that damage used to live. It was like a pulse, a flicker of something that might not have been hope exactly, but was definitely something close to it. Monday came like a whispered apology from the universe itself. The skies were gentle, and there was a slow wind moving through the trees that felt peaceful rather than restless. I didn't have any specific plans for the day, and for once that felt like freedom instead of emptiness or absence. I brewed my morning coffee and sat on the front porch with my legs propped up on the railing, completely barefoot and relaxed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have my phone in my hand. I just listened to the sounds of the neighborhood coming to life around me. Birds chirping in the distance, dogs barking somewhere down the street, and the low hum of a community going about its business without needing me to perform or participate in any particular way. At some point during that quiet morning, I realized something that startled me at first. I hadn't thought about Victoria at all since waking up. Not even once. Not for a single second. The realization surprised me initially, but then it didn't surprise me anymore. Healing doesn't announce itself with fanfare or dramatic revelations. It just starts showing up quietly, slipping in between your ribs during the moments you used to fill with pain and obsessive thoughts. I sat there for a full hour just breathing deeply and drinking coffee that stayed hot the whole way through, because no one was distracting me with a crisis of their own making or demanding my attention for their manufactured drama. Around noon, Sophia sent me a text message. It was just a photo of her coffee cup with a simple caption, "Sriracha on pizza tonight. Don't let me down with the execution." I laughed out loud at my phone screen and replied back, "Only if you promise not to judge how much cheese I decide to add to mine." There was no weight to our exchange, no hidden meanings or pressure to be something we weren't. It was just two people existing in the same air, not crashing into each other with desperate need, not pretending to be something more than what we actually were. We were just existing in the same space, and that felt completely natural and right. That afternoon, I went back inside the house and opened the last drawer I hadn't touched since Victoria left that night. It was the one that contained all the letters and cards we had exchanged over the years. Birthday cards, anniversary notes, and scribbled "I love you" messages on sticky notes from the days when we still meant those words when we said them to each other. I decided to read just one of them just to see how it would feel. I picked up a letter written in her distinctive handwriting, with that blue ink she always preferred, and the way she liked to loop her L's in that special, decorative way. "I don't know how I got so lucky," she had written years ago. "I still can't believe you actually picked me out of everyone else you could have chosen." I folded the letter back slowly and stared at it for a long moment, remembering the person who had written those words and the person who had received them. Then I walked outside to the backyard and tossed it into the old fire pit that we had used maybe 3 times during our entire marriage. I watched it curl at the edges and vanish into smoke that rose toward the afternoon sky. This wasn't an act of rage or revenge that I was performing. It was release. It was letting go of something that no longer served any purpose in my life. The truth was, it had never been about luck at all. Love is about effort and commitment, about trust and mutual respect. It's about showing up consistently and honoring the person you've chosen to be with. Victoria had abandoned all 3 of those fundamental things. She didn't lose me because I had stopped loving her or because I wasn't good enough for her anymore. She lost me because she stopped honoring me, stopped seeing me as worth the effort, stopped being worth the fight that she used to claim we were both committed to. As the smoke rose and danced in the setting sun above, I realized I didn't need to tell her any of this directly. She would feel it one day, maybe 10 years from now, maybe never. But eventually, she would feel the silence where I used to be, and she would know that it was completely her fault. The last Monday of the month arrived with a quiet coolness in the air. One of those days that doesn't try to be anything special or dramatic, but ends up being perfect anyway. There was no unnecessary drama, no noise or chaos anywhere in my world. Just a deep, satisfying breath of a day that belonged entirely to me. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror that morning, buttoning a new shirt I had bought for myself. It wasn't for anyone else, wasn't for a date or a special occasion. I had simply felt like looking put together, like presenting the best version of myself to the world. The man looking back at me in the reflection didn't look broken or defeated. He didn't look like a victim of anyone else's poor choices. He looked like someone who had been split in half, yes, but who had grown something new and stronger in the space that had once been hollow and empty. I left the house and drove to the lake, the same one where I used to take Victoria before we got married years ago. We hadn't been back there in forever because she always said it was too far away from everything, too quiet, with too much nature for her taste. But I remembered how she used to love it once, back when she was still willing to find beauty in simple things. And I remembered how I had always loved it regardless of her changing opinions. I sat by the water with my journal, not the kind with a fancy lock or an expensive leather cover, just simple pages filled with honest blank space waiting to be filled. I wrote something that felt important and true. This isn't a love story anymore. This is a survival story, and I made it through alive. I don't bleed when I say her name out loud, I continued writing. I don't flinch when I hear her laugh echoing in my memory anymore. I survived her completely and entirely, and now I get to begin again with a clean slate. I didn't cry while writing these words, but I did smile because I knew with absolute certainty what came next in my life. It wasn't about waiting around for someone new to fix what Victoria had broken inside me. It was about me learning how to want things again, to hope for good things again, to believe in possibilities again. Not in her, not in some idealized version of what we used to have, but in myself and in my own fundamental worth as a human being. The past had become a place I visited occasionally in my thoughts, but it was no longer my permanent home. I had moved out of that dark space and into something brighter and more hopeful. And if you're somehow reading this story, if you felt what I felt during those dark weeks, if you've sat alone in the darkness wondering how someone who promised you forever could vanish from your life without so much as a whispered explanation, then I want you to hear me when I say this to you directly. It gets better. It really, truly does get better. Not instantly, not cleanly like some Hollywood movie where everything resolves in 90 minutes, but honestly and quietly, day by day, step by step. You won't forget them completely. That's not how human memory works, and it's probably not even what you should want. But one day, you'll stop waiting for them to come back to you with an apology and an explanation. You'll realize something important that changes everything. You never actually needed them to begin with. You were whole before they arrived in your life, and you'll be whole again after they leave. The love you gave them wasn't wasted, even though it feels like it was. It was practice. It was training. It was you learning how to open your heart fully to another person. The fact that they couldn't handle that gift properly doesn't diminish its value or your ability to give it again to someone more deserving. Don't let their inability to honor your love make you afraid to love again. Don't let their betrayal convince you that trust is impossible or that all people are fundamentally selfish and unreliable. They were just one person who made bad choices, not a representative of all humanity or a predictor of your future relationships. Take time to heal. Take time to remember who you were before they came along and changed everything. Take time to figure out what you actually want, not what you think you should want or what someone else expects you to want. Your life belongs to you, and you get to decide what comes next. The ending of their story with you is actually the beginning of your story without them. And trust me when I tell you this, that story is going to be so much better than anything you can imagine right now.